Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. It's been a week since I've been able to post a video, and that is due to kind of a forced vacation, if you will. I do apologize for not putting out any of the videos I said I was going to last week. My internet was not working due to some technical issues, and I did have a lot planned on the weekend, so instead of forcing myself to get stressed about these and trying to put these out much quicker without enough time, I decided, hey, I'm going to take a little bit of time off and come back refreshed and ready to do these 3 videos without the stress. So tonight I will be diving into the 4th part of this Linkin Park discography digging, if you will. And I do apologize for any other background noises. I do have my fan on because it's really hot out tonight. So if that gets distracting, I do apologize. Anyways, I've already talked about Linkin Park's first 3 albums, Hybrid Theory, Meteora, and Minutes to Midnight. So if you've not checked those out, I do recommend you checking them out before you take a look into this one. This one's going to be a little bit different in sound, and it'll be interesting for you to see where they came from and how they got to here. So without further ado, let's talk about 1,000 Suns. So in May of 2009, Linkin Park announced that they were working on a 4th studio album, which was planned to be released in 2010. Shinoda told IGN that the new album would be genre-busting, which would also build off of elements of Minutes to Midnight. He also mentioned that the album would be more experimental and hopefully more cutting edge. So already from the get-go, we're talking about a different type of sound for Linkin Park that we are not used to. Another thing to throw out there that is a lot different is the idea that this album was going to be an abstract concept album, dealing with human fears such as nuclear warfare, and also referencing numerous social issues, and blending the ideas about human and technology ideas, if you will. So 1,000 Suns itself is a reference to a Hindu Sanskrit scripture, and where the particular line in this Hindu Sanskrit scripture also was first popularized in 1945 by J. Robert Oppenheimer, who helped test for the first nuclear atomic bomb. And he had his own speech where he described the atomic bomb as being as bright as 1,000 suns, which is a line that is used throughout the album, especially on the Catalyst, which we will talk about later. But that's where they got their idea from. And interesting enough, they do use a couple different people from history on some of their songs. So J. Robert Oppenheimer is on one of the songs, so is Martin Luther King, and Mario Savio, who, if you don't know who that is, and I honestly had to look that up myself, he was an American activist and a key member of the Berkeley Free Speech movement. And he is most famous for his passionate speeches, especially the "Put Your Bodies Upon the Gears," which is a speech that they use on this album. This particular album has a lot of different references throughout, and paying homage to certain things. So, like, for example, Wretches and Kings references the Public Enemy song "Fight the Power," and honestly, the album is very much compares to Public Enemy's 3rd album, Fear of a Black Planet. When They Come For Me references Jay-Z's 7th studio album, The Blueprint, The Gift, and The Curse. So this particular album blends a lot of different ideas, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But as you can see, this is a more grandiose album that is being put out. But before we get to that, we got to talk about a little bit of what was going on at the time before they put out this album. So while they were working on the album, Bennington toured with Dead by Sunrise in 2009, his particular supergroup that they made in 2005, but didn't put out an actual album until 2009, which is called Out of Ashes. So he toured with them in 2009. Also, the band worked with Hans Zimmer to produce the score for Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, which included the single New Divide. Honestly, not a great song. It kind of reminded me a lot of what I've done. So nothing to sniff at, if you will. Um, and then also, on April 26, 2010, the band released an app for the iPhone, iPad Touch, and iPad, which was a game called 8-Bit Rebellion. The game featured the band as playable characters and had a song called Blackbirds, which was released as a bonus track for 1,000 Songs. I won't be talking about that. I'm talking about the core album. But, so those are the small things that were going on at the time. They still worked with Rick Rubin. They still, Shinoda was also co-producing. And they were at the NRG Recording Studios in North Hollywood, California, from 2009 to 2010. Nothing really changing there. What does change, honestly, is the more experimental ideas, the genre blending, a lot of these bigger things. So, because the album itself has many different genres that you hear in here. So stuff like trip hop, stuff like electronic rock, stuff like ambient music, alt rock, industrial rock, experimental rock, rap rock, and progressive rock. A lot of fusion of these blending these ideas together, if you will. And comparatively to Minutes to Midnight, Shinoda does a lot more on a lot more vocals on these albums, on this album specifically, a lot more singing on this album. He does rap on When They Come For Me, and he does rap on Wretches and Kings, and he does kind of a reggae rap on Waiting For the End, but he sings on Burning in the Skies, Robot Boy, Blackout, Iridescent, and The Catalyst. And there's a lot of times where Shinoda and Bennington are singing together on Catalyst, Jornada del Muerto, Robot Boy, Iridescent. A lot of times they are singing together, and even there is a part in time where the whole entire band sings together on Iridescent. Also, a different thing compared to Minutes to Midnight, where Delson was more of the feature with his guitar work. He's kind of put into the background, and Han is brought back a little bit more of his electronics, a little bit of turntables. So you kind of do have a little bit of a switch around in the idea of what's getting to the forefront and what's in the background this time around. With that being said, the album was released on September 8th, 2010. There were 4 singles released for the album. The Catalyst on August 2nd, 2010, Waiting for the End on October 1st, 2010, Burning in the Skies on March 21st, 2011, and Iridescent on May 27th, 2011. Now, before we get into this, I have changed my feel of this album over the years, and we'll definitely get into that a little bit more. I can say I remember exactly where I was when I was listening to this album. I believe, if I remember correctly, this album came out either a little bit before or a little bit after Wasting Light, which I really, really liked. It was an awesome album that I really liked in my freshman year of college, and I remember hearing this and being somewhat pumped for it. The way that they were explaining it, the way they were talking about it, because I wasn't a huge fan of Minutes to Midnight. I liked some of the stuff, but I wasn't like blown away by it. Then I read some of the interviews and I read some of the Wikipedia stuff. They were comparing it to like Pink Floyd's The Wall as well as other concept albums, and it made me very interested because I'm a huge fan of concept albums. I'm a huge fan of progressive rock. So, like, to hear like Linkin Park, this awesome band that I really like, going further, I was really interested in. Then I listened to The Catalyst as the first song, and I was not too happy. I did not like the direction that they were going. I did not like the electronic sound. I wasn't a huge fan of EDM at the time, and I've grown over the years with that, but I wouldn't say I'm a huge EDM fan to be in general, or dubsteppy fan. So when I heard The Catalyst, I was like, what the heck is going on? I'm really scared for this album. I listened to it. I wasn't a huge fan. But that is my pretense on that. It's changed over the years, and we'll definitely get into this now. I think it's a darn good album. I think there's a lot of really interesting songs on here. Yes, there isn't as much Shinoda rapping, which is sad. I do miss Shinoda rapping on this. I do miss the more angsty parts of it comparatively to Meteora, comparatively to Hybrid Theory. But like they said, this was supposed to be a genre-busting album with using Minutes to Midnight as well. So they weren't going to be going back to that formula. And now I do see that. And when I take a look at it that way, as a concept album and as this genre-bending album, I think it does very well. My personal favorites are Burning in the Skies. I think that's a phenomenal song. It uses 6/4 in a very interesting way. It builds very well. I love the guitar lines on there. I love the melody. I love how Shinoda is singing the melody, and then Bennington comes in with the chorus. Some awesome harmonies, and even when it picks up with the drums, with the backbeat, and this more staccato guitar solo with like one note. I think all in all, it's a really nice song. It has some very interesting lyrics talking about someone who is caught in the aftermath of a nuclear fallout and seeing everything around them, and kind of wishing that they were the ones that were gone. Another awesome song is When They Come For Me, which is the first rap/hip-hop song on the album that has these awesome drum parts, these gnarling electric parts, and it builds and it builds and it goes in between D flat and C minor for the whole entire song for the most part. Shinoda's flow, even though it's only one of the songs that he raps on, is phenomenal. It's one of the best that he's had over the years, and it stands out with all these interesting instrumentations. And the chorus is nothing really. It's just basically Oz, but it brings this energy and this bombastic energy that I really like. I will say maybe the ending of it's a little bit weird, but it's, for a rap song, it's really cool. It's a really out there kind of rap song, and I really like that about it. Robot Boy, another one of my favorites, is literally right afterwards, and it's completely different. It's simplistic in the idea of it's mostly piano, and then it has a little bit of guitar at some points, a little bit of drums, but it keeps building. It is simplistic, and it is a little bit repetitive in its harmonies and its melody, because there isn't really much of a growing of a chorus. But there is an awesome riffing part at the end for Bennington that shows off his range, and I really like the chord progression. It's a really cool and really interesting circle of fifths motion, where you're literally having all major chords, and it's B flat, and then up a fifth to F, and up a fifth to C, and up a fifth to G, and then up a fifth to D. It's an interesting chord progression where you're blending a lot of different modes and scales, but at the same time, it works very well. The harmonies themselves are interesting, the melody is interesting, and it doesn't overstay its welcome, at least in my opinion. Waiting for the End, which is an awesome song, an awesome music video. It is a little bit weird with the reggae rap from Shinoda, but has some of the best melodies, has some really good building, has some interesting electronic parts, some very unforgettable parts, if you will. Has some of some of Bennington's best vocal prowess, especially on that last chorus, where he's belting those parts. Harmonies were interesting. All in all, another awesome song, and something that feels a little bit different from everything else that's going on. All these songs, for the most part, are standouts to me on this album. And that's not even getting to some of the other stuff. Like Iridescent, not my favorite. It kind of reminds me of more of kind of like Burning the Skies, but a little bit weaker. The instrumentation is kind of the same. The build is kind of the same. The melody itself isn't great. It's kind of cliched at parts, but it's a beautiful song about hope in these dark times. The Catalyst, again, it's grown on me more. I like the building of it. I like the dystopian sound, and it's an awesome almost closer. It's the penultimate song on this album, and it builds and it builds. Shinoda's part is awesome. Bennington's part is awesome. Um, I like the electronic parts now. I like the backbeat of the drums. I like how the guitar and the drums come in at the last part, making this grandiose sound at the end. And it's talking about the rebellious nature of, like, this is where we are, and this is now where we need to fight. Um, you know, uh, Most of these songs, for the most part, hit their mark. I will say there's a couple that don't do as well. I would say Blackout is one of those. It's somewhat like a rave-ish song. In terms of the beat, there's a lot of EDM breakdowns, a lot of like glitching sounds in the vocals in the middle section, and it's just weird all over the part. There's the beginning part where it's just Bennington singing very weirdly, as if it was electronically enhanced, and then it does bring the screams, which I'm happy to see come back. Because I don't remember much of it from Minutes to Midnight, but it was really cool to see him scream on another song. And then it gets to this distorted guitar part and this more of an EDM part, which is to me. And then it goes to this beautiful outro with Shinoda and Bennington, and it's them singing in unison at first, and then it keeps building, and then Bennington goes on a harmony, and it's a beautiful ending. I just think it's a weird one because of the way that Bennington is singing his melody, and it just feels weird because the whole entire song feels more upbeat than it should be in terms of how they're presenting this. Wretches and Kings is the other rapping song on the album. Not a bad one, just the flow isn't as great. The turntable at the end is really cool, but the chorus is one of the blandest ones on the album. The instrumentation is kind of bland, even though it has this really cool crunchy guitar feel that I really like. It's just bland instrumentation. The bridge before the outro, kind of lackluster, though the song itself is talking about political control and rebelling against it, and the bridge is talking kind of like move back and forth and sway, kind of like in a rock concert, which kind of is like manipulation, if you will. So I do understand that. Just it's not that great to me. And then I would put it above some of the others, but The Messenger is a weird ending song for me. It's a very optimistic song about when shit gets real, love is there to save us, which is cool for the most part. But it's stripped down. It's just guitar and it's just piano, and then it's Bennington's voice. It's a good song, and it's actually one of Bennington's best vocals. Even if it gets a little bit scratchy at times, it's still his power is awesome on here, and it's an optimistic ending. Even though the whole entire album is pretty depressing, like throughout most of the album, you're talking about nuclear fallout, you're talking about isolation, you're talking about the effect of nuclear warfare on everybody. The fact that you're waiting for the end to come, where you want to die and you're looking back on life, or you're the only survivor and you're looking, you're wishing that you were part of this of the actual dying, if you will. But it's a nice ending. It just feels a little bit weird because it strays away from the electronic things that got us here. Like, even most of the songs kind of build onto each other. All in all, there's 15 tracks, but 9 of them are real songs and 6 of them are interludes. And even the interludes kind of build onto everything else. So, like, from the get-go, you have the Requiem, which uses lyrics from the Catalyst, and it builds into Burning in the Skies. But the Radiance is a second song, and it kind of transitions between that first song and Burning in the Skies. And the Radiance uses the Oppenheimer speech, where they're talking about the first successful test of a nuclear weapon by the U.S. Army. So it segues into there. Empty Spaces is another song that just goes straight into When They Come For Me. Not much else is there. It's just an instrumental where Brad Delson is yelling out Spanish military commands, and it's just all the platoons, pay attention right now. You can hear gunfire, you can hear grenades going off. It's a 20-second song. It doesn't really do much. Jornada del Muerto is an instrumental with Japanese lyrics that translate to "Lift Me Up, Let Me Go," which are another foreshadow to the Catalyst. It's actually interesting. The lyrics are in Japanese because they were the first and only civilization so far to suffer from casualties from nuclear fallout. So basically, the "Lift Me Up and Let Me Go" is kind of saying like, "Let me get away from this cruel world." And the actual name of this song, another fun fact, comes from the desert region in New Mexico, about 40 minutes away from the Trinity nuclear test site where the first atomic bomb was detonated. It does have a little bit of a little bit of Burning in the Skies in terms of the electronic beeps and some of the chords, but again, not a song that does a little bit more, but not as much, because again, it doesn't have that interesting 6/4 feel that Burning in the Skies had. So I would say it's a little bit lackluster in the transition, but it brings stuff to the table. You also have Wisdom, Justice, and Love, which is an instrumental that includes Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech entitled "Time to Break Silence," which was delivered at Riverside Church in NYC on April 4th, 1967, that questioned the humanity of the Vietnam War and all war in general. It serves as a prelude to Iridescent and uses the piano chords from that particular song, and it gets a little bit eerie because as the song goes along, it gets a little bit more electronified and more animated and a lot more like computerized. So as the speech goes along, it gets very garbled up. It's an interesting one as well. Fallout is the only other interlude, and it uses a little bit of Burning in the Skies with the Bridges I Have Burned chorus, and it segues into the Catalyst. Though it has an interesting chord progression, it goes D, C, B flat major 7, G minor, and Shinoda and Benson are singing on it. Again, it's just another interlude. Like, it's interesting to me that out of 15 songs, 6 of them are interludes, which I get and I don't, I guess. Like I said, this album uses a lot of references and builds a lot of stuff together. And I think it does work over time, though on its own they don't really bring much. But if you listen to the album all the way through, I think it does a serviceable job with these interludes. The only other person I didn't talk about that I did reference before earlier is Mario Sabello, who has his speech, the Gear speech, in Wretches and Kings, which it brings a little bit more life to the song, but all in all, still not as one of my favorite songs. But still, if you go through it, Iridescent, even though it's one of the singles and even though it's not as great, it's still in the top half of the songs here. I think once you go like 1 to 7, I think you have some awesome songs. And, Blackout and Wretches and Kings bring their own stuff to the table. And then the other 6 I can't really rank as much because of them being interludes. So in all, it's a very interesting album. It's a very different album from anything else that they've ever done. If you were to tell me that in their first album that they would somehow eventually make a concept album, I would have laughed in your face because I would never have imagined that. And I think they did a serviceable job. I do think it ends a little bit weird. I do think some of the interludes could have been a little bit better, or maybe not as much. And I think there are a couple of songs that are a little bit weaker. But all in all, if you like Linkin Park and are interested in what they've done, or you're not as much of a fan as in Linkin Park, but you like concept albums, you like a little bit of genre bending. This is going to be one for you. I thoroughly enjoy it now, and I wish I appreciated it back then. Um, it's one of their better albums, but I won't rank it just yet. Still got to talk about the commercial success, if you will. So this album debuted at #1 on the U.S. Billboard 200 chart, with first week sales of 241,000 copies in the U.S., becoming Linkin Park's fourth U.S. #1 album. However, the first week sales were significantly lower than those of the previous albums, including Minutes to Midnight, which came in at 623,000 copies. This band also entered at #1 on the Billboard Rock Albums, Alternative Albums, Hard Rock Albums, and Digital Albums charts. In the second week, the album slipped to #3, selling 70,000 copies. It hit the 500,000 mark in December 2010 and certified gold on January 11, 2011. It spent 30 weeks on the Billboard 200 and exceeded 1 million copies sold in August 2017. 3 of the 4 singles charted on the Billboard chart. The Catalyst certified gold hit #27 on the Billboard 100 and topped the U.S. alt and rock charts. Waiting for the End was certified gold, hit #42 on the Billboard 100, #1 on the U.S. alt, and #2 on the U.S. rock. Iridescent hit #81 on the Billboard 100, #19 on the U.S. alt, and #29 on the U.S. rock. Unfortunately, Burning in the Skies did not chart at all. That is a shame, because it's a great song. The band was nominated for 6 Billboard Awards in 2011 for Top Duo or Group, Best Rock Album for 1,000 Suns, but Top Rock Artist, Top Alternative Artist, Alternative Song for Waiting for the End, and Top Alternative Album for 1,000 Suns. However, they did not win any award. And that's honestly basically it. They were nominated for a couple of things. They were listed, Kerrang! Listed this album as the 19th best album in 2010, while James Montgomery of MTV listed it as the 20th best album of that year. And it's interesting. You're seeing the decline a little bit because as, like, if you're going back to Hybrid Theory and Meteora, they're being up for Grammys. This one doesn't really get much in terms of notoriety for awards. They were nominated for 2011 MTV Video Music Aid Japan for Album of the Year. The Catalyst was nominated Best Group Video and Best Rock Video. The music video for Waiting for the End was nominated for Best Special Effects at the 2011 MTV Video Music Awards. At the 2011 Echo Awards, the band won for Best International Rock Alternative Group. Black Cat won Best Song in a Video Game Award at the MTV Video Game Awards for its use in FIFA 11. And finally, Waiting for the End was nominated at the 2011 Teen Choice Awards for Choice Rock Song. We're talking about something that's slipped a little bit in status. We were talking about Grammys before, and we were talking about all these other things. It's kind of interesting to see now they're talking about being nominated for smaller awards. But that's what happens. People were looking for more Hybrid Theory, more Meteora, especially after Minutes to Midnight. And this is probably where, if you were to, like, Minutes to Midnight kind of divided the group, but not as much. This is probably where you divide Linkin Park fans, is at this album. Because some people really like the difference in sound, some people really like the progressive side, some people really like the concept and the way that they experimented. Others were hoping and wishing for more Hybrid Theory, more Meteora, and were saddened to see what they came out with, this electronic, this EDM idea, this thing that didn't have that angst that they were looking for. And that's where you divide it. And they knew that was going to happen. They talked about it. And I was on that second side before. But now I see it for what it is, and I really like it. I think it is better than Minutes to Midnight by far. I think it's a more cohesive album than Minutes to Midnight, and it brings a lot more to the table. 1,000 Suns is a little bit more experimental, but I think Meteora, for the experimenting that they did and the angst that they brought, I think it's a better album. So the question is, what's better, Hybrid Theory or 1,000 Suns? And I was really thinking about it. but I think I have to go Hybrid Theory as the better album. Again, with the way that it defined this band, but I think it has a little bit better songs. I think there's a little bit too much filler with 1,000 Suns, and I think Hybrid Theory is just a little bit more solid. But if you were to tell me that 1,000 Suns is better than Hybrid Theory, I would not necessarily argue with you on that. So, with that being said, we now have our top 4. We're going Minutes to Midnight number 4, 1,000 Suns number 3, Hybrid Theory number 2, and Meteora number 1, as you just saw, going up the string. So, we just looked at the most controversial album, and now we get to a crossroads where this wasn't a very successful commercial album. And a lot of the fan base was divided on this. Even though a lot of people did like it, some people thought they wanted the past. So now, next week, we'll get to see what the ramifications of that particular action is when we take a look at Living Things. But before then, if you do enjoy this, and I hope you did, a couple different things: like the video, comment on where you would put 1,000 Suns, if you like it or if you hate it. I know this is a pretty controversial album, so I would like to see where people sway on this. Share this with your friends, subscribe to my channel, and just keep on watching my videos. So like I said, next week we're looking at Living Things, but Friday I'll be putting out a cover song, and then Sunday I'll be coming up with my 50th Are You In? I'm really excited to talk about it. And we're going to be talking about a certain artist that I talked about with a friend of mine a long time ago with their new album. But until then, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.